Sleep claims that there are 4 main differences between the Pod 3 and the Pod 4. In this video, I'll break down all 4 claims and then compare them to reality. And for context, I've slept on the Pod 2, the Pod 3, and the Pod 4, each for at least 7 months, so I know these products pretty well. Beyond Sleep's marketing, I'll hit on a few quirks and other details that I think are important that aren't really on the spec sheet. But to make things simple for those who are on the checkout page now and thinking about the Pod 3 or the Pod 4, just go with the Pod 4. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's only an extra $150 more, and if you're starting fresh, just get the newest thing they have. That small price bump gets you better comfort, tappable zones, and a quieter hub. But for people who already own the Pod 2 or Pod 3, there's a lot more that you need to consider if you want to upgrade, and a lot of that will come down to how old your current pod is. Sleep claims that a new design with contouring materials makes the cover 20% thinner, more dynamic, and more comfortable. Plus, they say it has no impact to the current feeling of your mattress. Speaking from experience, you can definitely still feel that the Pod 4 cover is there, but it's getting close to feeling like just your naked mattress, so Sleep is directionally accurate on that. That said, the jump in the comfort from the Pod 3 to the Pod 4 isn't nearly as drastic as coming from the Pod 2 to the Pod 3. To put things in perspective, I would say that the Pod 2 was about a 6 out of 10 for comfort, Pod 3 was about an 8.5 out of 10 for comfort, and then the Pod 4 is maybe a 9 out of 10. So it's definitely a little bit better, but not as drastic as the jump from previous generations. The next Sleep claim is more cooling power. Sleep says a redesign of the hub and cover enables double the cooling power of the pod. Now this claim I think is mostly marketing speak and a little bit misleading. I think what they mean is that Sleep can reach its targeted temperature over 2 times faster than previous generations. And even with that, I'm not really sure how they're getting that number. And the max coolness is still 58 degrees Fahrenheit, just like previous pods, which is more than cool enough. For me, my pod starts cooling at about 8:30 for my 9:30 bedtime, and it's always the right temp by the time I get to bed. But this was the case even with my older Pod 2 and Pod 3. And if you're using the scheduled temperature feature and you don't tweak your settings often, the faster cooling definitely won't be a factor. However, if you frequently manually adjust your temperatures and with high variance, you'll definitely notice a faster response time. And one thing to note is that I keep my bedroom around 72 degrees during the summer. So my pod doesn't really have to work that hard to get to my preferred -4 setting. So if your bedroom is a lot hotter, you'll probably notice this difference in cooling power. But with that said, like I talked about in my original review, I don't really recommend the pod to anybody who doesn't already have a reasonably cool bedroom. I just think you're gonna have a way better time in life if you get your bedroom temperature in order first before you get your pod. The next feature is a quieter hub. Sleep claims powerful thermal performance, stable at 30 decibels, which is 40% quieter than the Pod 3. And I will say when the Pod 4 is maintaining a stable temperature, it is noticeably quieter than the Pod 3. But to be fair, I didn't really think the Pod 3 was very noisy when it was maintaining its temperature either. The real issue is when the Pod 4 is actively heating or cooling. During those times, to my ears, it sounds about the same as the Pod 3. It sounds like a fan on high blast. But because the Pod 4 will cool quicker than the Pod 3, you won't hear that noisy fan for as long of periods as you would with the Pod 3. So if you change your temperature settings often, you will enjoy shorter bursts of noisiness, but I don't really think the sound of the hub is much of a beneficial feature here. The next feature is tappable zones. Sleep says, tap the zones on each side of the pod to control the temperature. Now this feature is a slam dunk. It's easily the biggest improvement from the Pod 3 to the Pod 4. A physical remote would have been nice, but tappable zones are even better. Each partner can tap their side of the bed twice to cool it or 3 times to warm it up. I can't even tell you how many times in the middle of the night I wanted to change my temperature, but I didn't because I just didn't want to be blinded by my phone by firing up that app. Now I can just double tap while still half asleep. Now let's get into the big change that's not mentioned on the spec sheet at all. Longevity is one of the biggest concerns that I hear from potential buyers. And Sleep doesn't directly address it in their marketing, but they did make changes. In a blog post, Sleep claims the Pod 4 is significantly more adverse to puncture force and more elastic, meaning you don't have to worry about wear on your cover. And they say that they simulate people rolling in and out of bed more than 100,000 times. Based on my personal experiences and what I've read online, here's what you need to know. With the Pod 2, many users, including me, experienced leaks. While this wasn't a universal issue, there is definitely a decent amount of noise on the internet, and it was big enough an issue for them to try and fix it. My Pod 2 leaked after just 8 months, which I thought was a pretty bad look. The Pod 3 switched to a slightly improved water mat, and while the leaks definitely were less frequent according to the internet, they still didn't disappear entirely. Even just a few days ago, Quinn from Snazzy Labs had a issue with his Pod 3. So it was less frequent, but it was still happening. With the Pod 4, they redesigned the system entirely. They replaced the water mat used in previous generations with tubing. This change should theoretically make leaks far less frequent. I had no issues with my Pod 3, and after 7 months with my Pod 4, I haven't had any issues either. The unfortunate part is that we won't know the true story behind the Pod 4 until a few years down the line, but then the Pod 5 and Pod 6 will be out. All pod covers come with a 2-year warranty, but if you are worried about the durability, you can go with the enhanced subscription plan for an extra $100 a year, which will give you a 5-year warranty if you want extra certainty. Now let's go over a few minor things that you won't see on the spec sheet. First up is the Pod 4 ditches the encasement cover that came with older models like the Pod 2 and most of the Pod 3 units. The encasement cover was strapped to your mattress, while the active grid would zip to the encasement cover. It added about an extra 10 minutes to the setup process, and it did make your mattress feel a bit firmer than it would without it. The encasement cover potentially protected your mattress a bit, but I'd say ditching the encasement cover was a good move. It makes your mattress feel more like the naked mattress than it did previously. Next up is the water requirements. Previous 8 Sleep models required distilled water and a little bit of hydrogen peroxide to go inside the water reservoir. This was inconvenient because you would have to regularly buy distilled water and you would need to have some peroxide handy. But the Pod 4 eliminates this, and they just go with straight tap water, and that's a lot easier. However, with this brings a new maintenance requirement for the Pod 4. You'll have to replace a filter on your hub every 6 months. And A-Sleep will send these filters to you automatically on a cycle when you're ready, as long as you remain subscribed to their subscription plan. But according to an 8Sleep rep, at some point in the near future, you will be able to buy these filters out of the member shop, even if you're not subscribed to a plan. Personally, I really prefer the old method compared to the new one. Now, I was wondering if you could just use the old method instead of the filters, and A-Sleep says you can use distilled water and peroxide if you want, but they warn that this may cause complications because these systems were really meant to have filters. So I guess I'm just sticking with their filter system. And the final minor thing not on the spec sheet is how the tappable zones add a bit of bulk. So fitted sheets don't fit quite as snug as they did with the Pod 3, and sometimes my sheets will ride up a bit higher than they would previously. So like I said in the intro, spending a bit more for the Pod 4 over the Pod 3 is really a no-brainer. It's just better. And I still don't really understand why 8Sleep is even selling the Pod 3 anymore, unless they were to bring that price down by like $1,000. At $1,000 difference, that might be an interesting discussion on which one you should go with. When the price is just so close and you're getting so much more value with the 4, it doesn't really make sense to me. And if you're upgrading, here's how you should think about it. If you currently own a Pod 2 and you've had it for a few years, the Pod 4 will feel like a huge leap. You'll get better comfort, durability, and a quieter hub, and tappable zones. I doubt these pods were made to last any more than 4 or 5 years, so if you're creeping up on that mark, I think an upgrade to the Pod 4 makes a ton of sense, and you'll love this upgrade. And for Pod 3 owners, I would wait a bit, unless you're really excited about those tappable zones. The Pod 4 upgrades are nice, but definitely more incremental compared to the 3. So ideally, you could get a little bit more time out of your 3 before you upgrade to 5 in a year or two. If you're a current pod owner, you can actually go right inside the app and shop through the member store, and you should be able to get $500 off the Pod 4 or $600 off the Pod 4 Ultra. But if you're a first-time buyer, I have a special link that will give you $200 off. And my link will actually convert to $250 off for the upcoming holiday sales, which will be the best deal out there for the Pod 4. And just for clarity, while I bought all 3 pods with my own money, I joined 8Sleep's affiliate program after my original review to help support my channel. So if you use my link, I will get a commission, but there's no pressure to use it. Just use whatever method will save you the most amount of money. So that's all I have for this video. I really do appreciate everybody who supports this channel. Thanks a lot. I'm out.